Hello and welcome back to the channel. Now in this video we're going to be creating an extension from start to finish based on a question I recently got. So here is the request for a video. So it was how to replace keywords in a paragraph in a web page. So that got me thinking, is this for a content script? Is it for a particular site that you want to go onto? And I thought, let's just take this a little bit further and make this into an actual extension. So in this extension we're going to be creating, users can, firstly, we'll need the all URLs permission so it can run on every single site. I won't go too much into onboarding and requesting these permissions because I've got a video that goes into this just here, which I'll link to in the description. But what we're going to be doing is having a options page that the user can go to after onboarding where they can enter different keywords that they want people to look for. And then you can either replace it, so it will change that word to something else. You can remove it, or something that could work quite well for, so you want to block spoilers or something, is we can take the parent element that word is from. So say it's in a paragraph tag and there's the word just there. We can apply a blur onto that entire paragraph so you can sort of block out these different messages or these different words. So hopefully this will help for the person that requested this. It's completely anonymous, so sadly I can't give credit to whoever sent this in. But let's get started straight away with our manifest file. Okay, so here is the manifest so far in Atoms. So we're using manifest version 3. We've got just a simple name, description, and our version here. Now we're going to be using manifest version 3 for this. So for our background page, we're going to be using a service worker. So you do that just like this. You say service worker. And then you need to pass this file basically needs to be in the root of your folder, so it can't be inside any subfolders in here. So for me, it's fine. I just do this, and that should link it up nicely. What we're going to do first, though, is just check that this is all working correctly. We're just going to log a simple message in here and save this and refresh. You can see we have our service worker just here, and that should say, yeah, the message. Now I'm going to try and move through this quite quickly. So if you've got any questions, about certain parts that I don't go into, you can leave a comment below, and I'll, try and get back to you on that. But otherwise, let's sort of try and speed through this first little part and get on to the main part of the extension, which is actually replacing these keywords. So the next thing we need to do in here is make sure we have permissions. Let's just do this here. Host permissions. And we're going to be using all URLs for this, but I just want to mention quickly that when you are using host permissions, particularly things like all URLs, or if you want to access all HTTPS sites, you really want to be requesting this permission by the user, so having some type of onboarding flow. Now I have a video all about this here, which I mentioned, and I'll link to that in the description. But I think it's really important that you do that because as Chrome moves forward with manifest version 3, this if you just put it directly in here, the user firstly could just ignore it when they first install the extension, or you could lose this permission because of the way that it really clamping down on that. So just be careful for what you're doing here and be sure to actually get this requested. But for now, another thing as far as when you are using this in development mode, all URLs. Let's try that again. Yeah, so as you can see here, if I go down here, you can see it says on all sites, but that's just because I'm in development mode. What you would want to do really is changing it to on-click and then doing your onboarding and testing it that way. But like I said, I'll go into more detail in this video over here. So now we have a extension that has access to all URLs. We have our service worker that's running in the background. So what we need to do is have a way of injecting this content script just here. Now, just before we finish with our manifest, we also need to add an options page. So to do this, we go options UI. So we're just gonna have a standard page here, like this, or just op.html. And that will be, we'll just create a file for this. And this will be the display of our options. Let's just put a simple heading in here for now. And in this page, the users will be able to add more keywords they want to look for, and that will just add another option onto the page, and then they can choose what they want to do with this. Do they want to just replace it, remove it, or blur out the paragraph, or containing tags. There's a few different types of elements they could use. Could be a paragraph, could be a div, could be a section, could be a link. So we need to look for all of these, a heading, and then check that when we write this script in a minute on our script.js. So if we refresh this now, if we just go back, refresh, give it an error just here, options page. My bad, it's just page, just here. So if we refresh, okay, so if we look over here and pin this and right click, you can see we have our options, and that takes us just here. So there's two ways you can have your options page. You can have it open in its own standalone tab, or you can have it appear just like this on the page. There's a full page on the Chrome docs here that goes into details about this. So if we scroll down to where you add your options page, you can have it like this, or you can go into more details like I did here and actually see if we want to open it in a new tab or not. So if we were to change this to true, that would give this options page its own standalone page here. So you can see the difference. You can see the difference here. If we go back now and refresh, and then right click, options, you can see it opens in its own page. Now, depending on what you're building, that might be more useful than just having it appear just in the corner there. But I quite like the way that works, so I'm just going to stick to that. And we could have just called options page like this. There we go. We could just do that, but I just wanted to explain more about the other options there. So if we refresh, you can see we have this just here, but because we wanted to make it open like that, we can just use this, and it opens it nicely in this little overlay. Depends on what you want to do. It's just a slightly different way of displaying it. Okay, and as I mentioned, I'll put a link to all of these, the information about this in the description as well, along with those other videos. Okay, so now we have our manifest file all set up. We shouldn't need to change this at all, but if you were going to publish this, like I say, change the permissions so that it's requested during the onboarding. So now we've got an options page here, which we need to fill out with our settings, and we have a script that we're going to be injecting from our service worker, and that's just about it. So what we need to do in here instead is create a listener that will find out when the user has changed the page. So has the tab changed? Just before we get started on our service worker, just make sure to add the scripting permission into your new permissions array here, so that we can actually inject this script. Otherwise, we need that permission there. So as I show in that other video, and we're going to write through this really quickly, but if you want to learn more about injecting content from your background page, you can see the video here that's linked in the description. But for now, we're just going to use this option just here. Load a random site. You can now see there we got our message just there, our alert. It's closing straight away, but you can see it's actually working. It might be more effective for us to add a console log here. Just add some sort of way we can spot this really easily if they've got lots of meshes in their console. So we go over here, we'll close this, refresh, check out the console script, check out the console, and there you can see. Okay, so we now know that our script has been injected. So if we just went on a couple of other sites and just see if this still injects. Okay, so you can see there is our script just here. So we know that it's being added to the page. So the next thing we can do is start to build out our options. So if we think about what we want to offer the user here, we need a way of letting them add more keywords on here, and then finding a way that we can replicate that as we save it. So we're going to be using local storage as a way of saving this. So we're also going to need an options.js. So if we just go opt.js, and then we'll just include that at the bottom down here. So again, if we look at the docs for this, you can see one of the sort of examples they provide is the way of having multiple options here and having your options page just here, or your options script. And this will just link up with the Chrome storage to then save all of these options. But essentially what we're doing is we have a function that loads when the page loads. So here, see here, when the page is loaded, we say restore options. Restore options basically just grabs all of this from the Chrome storage and then sets the display accordingly. So what we're going to have is something similar to this, but we're going to have dynamic options here. So they could add as many different keywords as they want. What we could do is, as a start point, just copy this here. So if you want to, I'll put a link to this in the description so you can follow this as closely as possible. Saves you a bit of time writing all this out. So we need to change a little bit of this here in terms of words options, and then what we're going to have down here will probably be quite different. So we will still have our script and everything just here, so we'll leave that the same. So we'll probably need to just copy this as well just to save time, but the actual IDs and options will be completely different. It says that just here. So where we're saying these, we don't need that. We don't need that, but we'll leave this the same. It's quite a good example to use, and that's then where we're restoring options just there. So we'll change all that. Everything else will stay the same. Okay, so let's just save this, go over here, and start thinking through what our options are going to be. Now let's create a base setting first, and then we can move this over to JavaScript so we can sort of adjust that. So what we're going to have, I'm just going to create a div here. Think of this as I go, so bear with me a little bit here. So we're going to have a label for keyword, and then we're going to have an input to let them actually type in this word, so what to look for. And a placeholder of the keyword, so something like this, and then we'll have another label down here. So actually we'll probably have two divs here, and then a parent div around this. So this will be the main part here, and then so we'll give these a class name of keyword row, and then in here we'll call this input item. Input item. Okay, so what we're going to have here is this is where they can select what's going to happen. So we'll probably say something along the lines of maybe just select type, and then down here we'll have select and a number of options. So we're going to say either replace, remove, or blur. And then each of these will give a value. So replace will be 0, remove will be 1, and blur will be 2. So it's slowly taking shape. And then what we need to do over here is actually give these parameters a bit more of an ID, or something along those lines. But what we're going to do first is also create a button down here for adding another keyword. And then when they click this, it will actually attach another keyword row here. So what we're going to do, actually add another div and call this keywords holder. So we can just append any new rows onto here. So we'll put a class on here so we can easily grab this, call it add keyword. We'll try and keep this as simple as possible. So then over here in our script, we can add a check down here. So we'll say document, put some comments in here to make it nice and clear. So say query selector, put a dot in front because it's a class name, we want to grab that, and we'll say add event listener, click. We've got our function here. So this is where we're gonna attach a new element into here, basically. So what we will need to do for that is grab the base display of this. So we'll say keyword row equals .inner HTML, like that. And then all we need to do is simply append that on. So we could just append this to the inner HTML for now, and then we can just clean it up a little bit afterwards. So all we need to do here is say query selector. It's much better to append these as a new element rather than just adding it onto the inner HTML. But just while we're putting this together, this will be a little bit quicker. So we'll see we have keywords holder here, because what that would actually do, if you had any event listeners attached to different parts in here, which we are going to have, by doing it this way, it would remove them. So I'm just going to do this quickly just to show you that it will update this. So we'll say inner HTML plus equals keyword row, but we're not going to, like I say, we're not going to do this on the main version just yet. We're going to append a fresh element there. So if we go here, go to our options, which you can see here, and if we add another keyword, nothing happens. That's why. We didn't call our options page options, and it's called options. Okay, so let's go back now, we'll refresh that. This again, let's see what we have now. Okay, so you can see it's adding these, but what we need to do is, depending on the option they select here, if they want to replace, we need to give them the option to enter in the word they want to replace it with. So what we're going to be doing for that is for each of these parts just here, we're also going to have a hidden, well, it's initially going to be hidden item at the bottom. I'm going to say replace with, and it will say replacement word, something like that. And this will be hidden initially, so we'll just say hidden. And then we can just add some styling up here. Could move this into an external style sheet if you wanted to, but again, we're going to try and keep it nice and simple. So we'll just say display none, make sure you put the dot in front because it's a class name. And then if we save this, we should see, well, there shouldn't be any change. So if we go over here, refresh, go to our options page. Okay, so you can see it's there, but if we actually inspect this, we should have our other element added now. Yeah, input item just here. So if we take off hidden, you can see we have all of our replacement words. Now, what we need to do is actually add an event listener for when these are changed to actually replace it, or hide and display this part here. Now, to make it nice and clean, we should probably change these orders around. So the first one is remove, otherwise it probably makes more sense for this actually to appear first if we were replacing it. So we'll start with remove, then the fact that this is hidden makes a little bit more sense, hopefully. So we have that just here. Yeah, so what we're going to do next actually is change the way we're doing this. We're going to create an element in here rather than just adding the inner HTML, because what we need to do next is attach a listener for when these parts are changed. And the way we're doing it just here by replacing all this inner HTML, that will remove those listeners, so it won't work. So what we need to do instead is create an element. So we're going to set a new variable down here called new row, and it'll be document create element. And we use a div in here, and then we'll just say new row class name equals keyword row, like that. And if we look at the inner HTML just here, you can actually see only this one has the keyword row anyway, and the way we're doing it is we're already grabbing all of the inner HTML like that, which was wrong essentially, but it's useful for testing. And then we can do new row inner HTML equals keyword row. Now this is different to what we were doing before because we're only adjusting the inner HTML of this new element, not the whole existing part here. So we'll take this away and we can say, we can still grab this and we can say append child new row. I think that's right. So what that will do now is we're grabbing the keyword row in HTML, creating a fresh new element, giving it that same class name, and then adding the inner HTML into that new element. And then we're just taking the keywords holder and appending a child element of our new row. Okay, so what we'll do is go back and refresh again. And if we go over here to options, add another keyword, you can see it's a bit smoother there. And if we check the way it's looking in here now, you can see they're all inside these rows, which makes a lot more sense. So that means now when we attach these listeners, they won't get messed around each time we actually tweak this. Like I say, we can adjust the CSS and all that later. So what we need to do now is create a way of actually adding a listener onto this and then either hiding or displaying that option. So what we're going to do is create some sort of way that we can check this each time, because when we're loading our options here from storage, so actually let's go ahead now and add storage into here. Otherwise that's going to keep causing some errors. So if we go over here, so we're going to have save options. So it's when we load options, we need to have a function down here that will sort of set the listeners. So we'll say create listeners, and then we can add a new one down here. So we'll say create listeners, and then this will need to loop through all of the elements. But actually what we probably would need to do is first create the elements, because we're only going to have this first one here available when they first load the page. So if they've got, so the person's created 5 keywords, we don't want to, we need to get them first. So we need to then check afterwards what's going to happen. So we should probably say build options, build options display. So in here, and what we'll do is we'll pass in a array or an object that we're going to save. So we'll call this, so we'll save this as something more specific. So we'll call it keywords array, and then default to this. And then we'll just say items keywords array. So that's what it would look like in here. So we can just pass that through straight away. And then we'll just say items here. So then we could just say for items in items. Now we know that this will be our item that have an object with the keyword, the type that we want, and then if it's a replace, if we're going to replace it, what we're going to replace it with. That will all be saved into just in here. And then so when we're saving things, we'll do it exactly the same way. So we'll go first, we'll probably have a step here in which would clean it. So we want to convert this into a array again. So we'll say function build save array like that, and then this would do some stuff here to create our array. So our array would be, so we've got a variable save array equals this array just here. So that'll be all our information. And then we'll just go save options with save array, if that makes sense. So we'll just pass this in just here. And all we would need to do is where we have our keywords array, we'd set that just here. So keywords array with save array. So it keeps it really, really simple. That just means what we need to do down here, instead of calling save options just here on click, we'll call build save array. And then we're going to have a bit of code that we're going to put in here that's going to build out our array based on the display in our page just here. So what we need to focus on first though is restoring our options. So if we know we've got no items in here, we don't really need to do anything. So if this is an empty array, it's not going to do anything anyway. But because we have our items, we can then optionally add more into it. And that's then we'll get to the point I'm talking about down here, where we will attach this listener. So, right, what we need to do now is build out these items here. So what we're going to look for first is the different types of objects that are going to be in here. So if we really think about this, we know that our add keyword part is going to create a new row. So we're going to change that into a function as well. So we'll call it create, we'll build a function. So we'll just name that as well. So say function create row with options. And then in here, we're just going to say an object, which will include our options. So what we're going to instead do is very similar to what we have down here. We're just going to copy this and then use our options to fill out this information. So what we know is we're going to set this a different way, and we need a way of actually accessing this new item we've just created. So we're going to say new row data set ID, and then attach some sort of ID in here. So we could just use the current timestamp. So we'll say var timestamp equals date now, date, not data, and then pass that in just here. Let's see how that looks. Is it date now or date now? New date now. It's one of these. I can never remember. So let's just see how this looks, and then what we'll do actually down here. So where I've got this part, we're going to remove all of this and then pass in our object. Now for our object, we're going to say this. So we're going to say object equals curly brackets, which basically creates a new object here, and then we can just go type, well, we'll say keyword equals example object type equals, now what were the different options here? So we've got 0 is remove, 1 is replace, and 2 is blur. So for this first one, we're going to say replace. So that is 1. We save these as strings, don't we? So we'll keep it as strings, like that. And then we'll say replace, and then we'll pass in a word we want to put in here. So we'll say, instead of example, we'll just say string. So that is a keyword. So these are the object. This is the object of information we're going to pass through. So that is what we have just here. So then what we can do is, now we know that this has an ID. Down here, once it's been added to the page, we can use our query selector to actually grab this new element we've just added. So we'll say grab our keyword row like this. We can go like that and say data ID equals, and then pass in, so a little string just here, this timestamp. Now I'm not 100% sure that will work because I'm not sure if that date object is correct. We'll check in a moment. That should grab this element. So then what we'll do is we'll just say new element is this. So the reason I'm doing it this way rather than appending it all just here is just to show how we can add it to the page first and have this update. But you could do it that way. So we then say new element. So that means we've got this element just here. Then we can grab our query selector. And this is where, the reason I'm doing it this way is it means if we change anything here, this can be our main sort of source of truth. We could have done this set this in the JavaScript page if we wanted to, but it's just a little bit cleaner to have this, written in here. I'm not sure why my editor isn't working correctly with the highlighting and the colors and linting it nicely, but anyway, that's a separate matter. So what we're going to do here is we've got our class. So we're going to call this one keyword, we're going to call this one type, and we're going to call this one replace. Just so we can grab these elements a bit more easily. So then we can just say keyword input, so that'll be the actual input field. And then we can say value equals object, if I can type, keyword. So that'll grab that first part there. And then we can say if object type equals 1, so it's a string, if it equals 1, then we know that we need to make the replace part visible. So for that, we can just say new element. So we want to get keyword. For this, we're going to say replace. We don't need to grab the input because it's that whole element. And we can say style display equals block, which will then make that element appear. And then finally, if it's in here, we know we also need to set the contents of the word we want to replace it with. So we can say replace input, exactly the same as before. We'll use value, and this will be object replace. So we've got quite a bit of code in here. We should probably test this in a minute. But just before we do that, we're also going to set the actual selector as well. So select the option we want to use. So that is type, and then select type. Okay, so there's a few things going on there, but that's fine. So what we'll see if this worked when we add our keyword, because we're using this object, we can see if this actually links this all together. So let's go and refresh this and see what type of error we get. I think if anything, it's going to be this date issue here. It might not need these brackets, but we'll find out in a second. Refresh, open our options page. Okay, so here we go. And if we create one, okay, so we have a slight error here. It could be any of these things I mentioned. Okay, so it is this date. So let's just check it just here. So we're going to go new date now. Okay, I was almost there. I was thinking of something else. So date now. So if we go back and refresh, so here we go, we've refreshed. We're going to open our options, add a keyword, and here you go. You can see it's already adding the string down here. So it's filling in the keyword, it's selecting the correct option here, and it's already showing what we want to replace it with. So that means what we have here is working. So if we had changed that to something else, it would have shown this instead. What we're also going to do when we're adding this just here, so because we're creating our row, is we're also going to attach a listener for when that select box is changed, to then either show or display that, because like I say, by here, we already know it's been added. So what we can do is exactly the same as before. So we've got the select box just here. So let's just grab this. So we'll say add event listener. Rather than click, we're going to wait for it to be changed. It's going to call a function. There we go. And then all we're going to do is get the value of this element. So we'll say e in here. So we'll say e.value if e value equals 1, display block, otherwise hide. But what we'll also need to do, the scope of this could have changed. So if we had multiple elements in here, that could affect different ones. Let's just run this quickly just to double check, but I'm pretty sure we would need to create a line just in here to grab the parent element of this item here, rather than showing all of it. So what we'll do is just log this into the console just to make it easier for you to debug that, rather than just writing it from scratch. We're going to add another keyword. We're going to change this. Yeah, so what you can see at the minute, it's not taking any effect at all, even though this is changing. So you can see we have our error just here. So our listener isn't a function. Our problem is I just said add listener, not event listener. we just need to change this to, we'll call it element equals e target. So you can just see from the error there, we weren't actually calling listener or event listener. So we'll use this, and then we can say element dot value is this, and then we just need to work out how we're going to grab the parent element of this, because you can't really rely on this, like I was saying, being available. So what we're going to instead do is create a new one called parent, and this will be equal to element dot parent node. So if we just check here, so we're looking for, we've got this element just here, we want to grab this, but we actually don't, do we want to grab this one? So we need to grab the parent way back here, so that would be, this would be 1, 2. So parent node dot parent node, and then from there we can grab this part here. So let's see if that works. Yeah, you can see that is the correct thing. It would be 2 of those just there. But we'll go back now and refresh this, and we're going to open our options, add a keyword, and we can see, look, as we change it now, it's updating each time. So that's all good. What we're going to actually do is, when we're adding this for the first time, we're going to remove that actual HTML version here, so that all of them are more dynamic. So when we're adding the very first item here, so when we're saying create row of options, what we need to do, because once this runs the first time, it's going to be fine. So as soon as we've grabbed this, we can then say remove first item. So we'll say if, in here, we'll say if this element here, so if type of that data set is undefined, then remove, because we know it's that first type. So we can just say remove, like that. So we'll go back now and refresh. Let's see if that worked. For our options, we can see here we have one that we can actually, oh no. So what we'll do is we'll use the actual ID rather than just data set, and check that's undefined. And then if that is the case, we'll just simply run this code here, which will just remove that first one. So we'll go back now and refresh, and that should only remove that first ever item. So we'll just add a comment here, remove first item. And because we're going to be adding new ones in after that, and they will all have a data set ID, we're okay to actually remove this. So it'll only ever take away the first one. So we'll just double check that just here and see what we have. So we've got our options. You can see this is now working. But what we need to do is, as we saw just there, it is updating when we add another keyword. But we don't want to do that. We don't want to have to do that every time. So we want to be able to load it from our saved options. So as we saw what happened there, if we close this and reopen it, it's actually not working until we click add. So the problem here is because if we go back up here, you can see we're calling this build options display, but we're not actually, we're never actually running this. So if we go over here and make sure that we're adding our first item in, so we can do something here that says if items length equals 0, so if there's actual no value here, we're just going to call this empty. So we could actually just say, we could call this just here. So we could pretend to click add new keyword rather than calling anything. So I'll just add a new fresh, effectively programmatically call that button. So just say click like that. So that's if there's nothing in here. But if there is, we want to go through and actually make sure we add this properly. So we can do that quite easily now by building an object like this. So we would just say, so this would be items I. So we're going to save this as an object. So that would be keyword We could even just pass this directly in, like that. So we don't even need to create it. We could just check to see it's an object. So if type of items I equals object, then add it in like that. So then all we need to do is focus on saving. So up here we have our build save array. So what we're going to be doing here is using query selector all to look for all of the different elements we have in here and then save them. Well, get the options first and then save them. So we're going to set this as an array up here first, and then we're going to grab our elements. So we'll say elements equals query selector all. If you want to skip ahead to the actual content script part, there's chapters down there, so you can move forward if you want to. So down here anyway, for query selector all, we're just going to use, we want all parts of keyword row. So we'll grab all of those rows like that. And then all we're going to do is loop through all of these elements, because query selector all, well, document.query selector all will give us an array of all of these different elements. So we can use that just here. And then we just need to do exactly what we did before, essentially, but the opposite. So down here where we were setting this information, we now need to get this information. So it will be something like this. So the first one will be the keyword. So we're going to say, first going to set a new array. So we'll say object or new object like this. And then it'll be object keyword equals, so this is here's our element here, input value, so that is our keyword, and then there'll be type, which will be type select, and then there's replace, which will be replace and value. So that's quite straightforward. And then all we need to do is push this onto our array. So we'll say save array push object. And that essentially will just add that onto this array here once it loops through all of these different ones. So it'll start being empty, then it'll add these all together. So let's see if this will actually work now. So we've got this building everything just here, and that should be correct. We just need to check that our object makes sense. We've got keyword type replace, and up here keyword type replace. So I think this should do what we need. So we'll refresh, open our options, and here we go. So our first one, let's just say, is test with string. We'll add another keyword. This one will just remove. So we'll remove anything that says example. Then we're going to press save, and it says options have saved. So we can test this now. If we go away and come back, yeah, we've got our test one, which replaces it to string. We've got our keyword we want to remove, and it's showing replace with. So by default, that part isn't quite working just yet. So let's just check down here where we have remove. Yeah, so this is meant to be just here. It could be because we have an error actually with this value. So if we go over here and double check, yeah, we can see we missed this just there. But that still should be setting that. So maybe what we need to do is just check down here. So what I might do actually is where we're building our array. So just here, we're going to say build row and just show the object, because it could be that the type is a number rather than a string just here. So we'll close this, fresh, open. So down here, build row 1, build row 0. So that should have worked. So if we just check down here, yeah, because what we're doing at the minute, because we removed it the first time, this is why. So when we fetch our inner HTML, the first time it's grabbing it from our HTML page where we've set it up, we've written this code. The second time, once we've removed it, it means we're grabbing it from our pre-existing type. So that's where we have it as display block. So we just need to go through and just make sure it's going to be disappeared, and then we should be all good. Because as soon as we change this, if we go to replace and then remove, it will hide it. So it knows what to do. It's just getting confused that first time because of where it's grabbing it. If this was the other way around and we had remove type first rather than second, it would have worked. But just because of that slight difference, you know, it's getting a little bit confused there. But now we should be all good to refresh this and then move back to actually write now our content script. Here we go. Let's go to our options. We can see now it's working correctly. We have it as remove, but if I was to change this to replace and just call it word, then save again, close it, open it. So there's our first one. So let's say I've got a slight issue here. It doesn't know which order to save this array into. So what we should probably do when we're going down here, where are they? Yeah, we're calling this, so if we go create row of options, and we're going to optionally pass through our ID. So you see where we have just here where we're looping through. We're going to say int equals 0, so it'll default to 0. So up here where we're adding our timestamp, we're going to actually pass in this as well. So we'll pass it in like that. And it will just add onto it. And that should hopefully just make sure there's some sort of gap in between these two. Okay, so we have an example, replace word, and then we're going to have another one. Yes, that's not quite working, is it? Okay, that's why. Because the timestamp is missing just here. So what I'd need to do is loop this here. Like that. So we're setting it all in the same place. That should do the trick. That would definitely cause that problem because we have changed the ID before we actually use it. So that's definitely going to mess that up there. So if we look at this now, if we go and replace, remove, yeah, that's much better. I'll change this, add this to be another save, close, open again, yeah, add another keyword, test, save, options. Yeah, this seems like it's working correctly. And if we were to add one, yeah. Okay, so now we're happy with this part, we can move on to our content script. We're just going to take this same options that we've saved to our local storage and then actually perform this to actually change the display of the page. So it can actually remove these words. So if we go now over here, we can actually take our options here. So if we go to, where is it? Restore options. So we can just do that. So we go to our content script. The first thing we want to do is get our items, and then rather than saying build out display, we'll call this function something else. We'll say replace page words, and then that will take the items or keyword array just here. And this we're going to run this code, so we'll call this in here like that. So then in here, what we're going to do, very similar to before, is just loop over this array. So we've got our keywords array just here. And then what this is actually going to do is call a separate function. So we'll call a function here that's called just replace word. And that's where we're going to pass in the object. So we can actually have that part run in here. So where we have this, we're just going to say replace word. And that's where the information will be here. So now what we need to do is first check the type. So depending on the type of the page, we need to check this just here. But before that, we're going to create a query selector that's going to get every possible element on the page that could contain some text. So we're going to call it all elements equals document query selector. So this here is the main actual part of the extension. So where could text be? It could be in an H1, H2, H3, H4. Let's just go up to H5. Could be in a paragraph, could be in a link, could be in a caption, could be in a div. It could be in a section, article, span, could be in a table. Let's just use all of these for now. I'm sure there's plenty more we could add, but let's get all of these elements. And one thing there we need to make sure we change is query selector all. Now for some bigger sites, it could be quite intensive if they've got lots and lots of paragraphs there, but we're not going to worry too much about that right now. It's about speed, getting something put together quite quickly. So then what we're going to do is loop through all of these elements, and we want to find out if this element has text that includes a keyword. So we're going to say if this element inner text, we're going to use inner text here rather than inner HTML because that just takes out, so there's a string that has a bold or italic tag, either part of the word but not all of it, this will still manage to grab it. But again, it doesn't really matter, we could have just used inner HTML. So inner HTML includes keyword. Then we want to run our code in here. One thing I'm thinking about here though, we should probably check, like first push it to lowercase and then check if it includes it, because there could be slight, parts that could be missed there. So now we know that this element, whatever it is, includes a keyword. So what we want to do now is check what to do with it. So this is where we want to use our type. So if object type equals 0, we'll do this. Else if object type equals this, we'll run our code in here. And then finally, else if object type equals 2, we'll do something slightly different. So now we know what we're going to have in here. So each one of these, I can't remember already. So we've got remove, replace, and blur. So let's just comment that in here. So remove, replace, and blur. Now that will blur the parent element. So we can do that. We can do this one first because it's really, really simple. So we'll just say all elements I, style, color equals transparent. So essentially we're going to hide the text and then add a blurred text shadow. So we can add a blurred text shadow like this. All it's going to do is just not add any shadow horizontal or vertically. We're just going to blur it. All we're going to do is blur it, and this is the color. So it's going to be 50% opacity. So that should be all we need to add there. If we want to remove it, so we'd still grab our all elements like this. Inner HTML replace. We're going to put our string in just here. So this will be our keyword. So we're going to look for our keyword and turn it into this. And then for replace, very, very, very similar to this one, we're just going to say get our keyword and use it to replace. Now that should be all we need to do to replace this. So let's go and test it somewhere. And let's find a word that we have on this page, Australia over here. So this is well, it's just slightly different, but it's inside a span, so it should still work technically. So we're going to add this into our options. So we go to options. We should probably add a way to remove these soon. We're going to say Australia blur and save. Then we're going to go over here and refresh this page. Okay, I'm missing a closing bracket here. So that should match up now. Okay, almost there, almost there. So we just refresh our extension again. Refresh. haven't got an error here, but did this apply? One thing that could have actually happened here, so where we force that part to be lowercase, we probably need to make sure that we're making these lowercase as well. So if we go back onto here and refresh now, yeah, you can see it's blurring out a lot of this page, more than I would have wanted actually. But if we look here in this element, you can see each of these are in spans. That span contains Australia. This contains Australia. I'm pretty sure they don't all contain Australia. So you can see that blur effect though, it's working quite well. Where's this coming from? Here. Okay, so what we probably need to do is take it away from divs because it's applying too far down. Whereas these parts here would all be areas that would just contain one particular element. So even this article and section probably wouldn't be useful because they can be inside of that, whereas these seem much more reliable to use. So if we go back now and refresh, scroll down our page, this seems more like it. And then if we have a part here that says Australia, it's blurring those out, which is exactly what we wanted to do. Now one thing I'm going to do as well is where we move this to lowercase, I'm also going to put our keyword into lowercase as well, just for that check, so we can make sure that we're matching all of the right elements. So if we go back to our options and capitalize it again, and we're also going to add another keyword. So what have we got on this page? Ashes. Let's use that as our keyword. And we're going to replace this with just like that, something simple. So we'll save, we're going to go back, we're going to refresh this page, let it do its thing. Okay, so it's worked on the first one still, but it hasn't done anything else. So if we add some logging in here, let's just say console log replace checks for object, and then passing our object just here. Okay, so you can see what it's doing. So it's looking for ashes and trying to change this, but that definitely hasn't taken place. Okay, right, I've just worked out what's going on here. We need to actually reset the HTML. So even though this part here will work, we're not setting it anywhere, which is a big mistake I made. Now that will actually take effect, because all this is doing is setting an empty variable. You know, we're not setting this anywhere. We're just saying, you know, change this here with this, but we're not setting that back into that page. So, you know, it's a silly mistake, but these things happen. So if we go in now and refresh, you can see this is now working. Now there's a few ways we could probably make this quicker. You could perhaps blur out the entire page whilst you're waiting for these parts to work. But if we were to look at this, you know, if we were going on a normal page, if we go back here, where was this page we're looking at? This one here, you can see it's working on there. So it's definitely having more of an impact on the page now. I think that blur effect could be quite useful. But yeah, this is an extension. It's really quick to build. You can see, well, relatively quick to build. I'm sure it'd be much quicker if you're just doing this without talking at the same time as well. I think it would be quite useful to have a way to remove these. So let's just go ahead and add that in now. Why not? So where we have our options just here, we're going to add something at this row, just a little paragraph that will say remove row, and just put in a button that just is like, let's just put this as a div instead, like this, and we'll set a class, and then over here where we're setting our other event listener just here, we're going to create another one for our button. So this will be called, what do we just call this? Remove. And we're going to change that to click over here. And that will just simply be new element. remove. Like that. So I'll only actually properly remove it once you then click save again. But if we just go back and refresh and try this out, options, so we can now remove, let's remove this one and this one, save, open it again just to check that that worked. There we go. And styling wise, like this, it would be quite easy to improve this. So if we go back over here, refresh, you can see we have Australia just there, and that's now been blurred out. Okay, so that is a simple extension that is something that could be developed into something quite interesting, with only a few adjustments really added into that design, and really trying to find something unique with the way that you build it. If you've got any questions on any of the things I've done here, because I have rushed through this quite a bit, just leave a comment below or send me an email. I'll leave all my details in the description. But otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.